In the political realm, there is a debate whether Napoleon was an enlightened despot who laid the foundations of modern Europe, or a megalomaniac who wrought greater misery than any man before the coming of Hitler. Many historians have concluded that he had grandiose foreign policy ambitions. The Continental powers as late as 1808 were willing to give him nearly all of his gains and titles. But some scholars maintain he was overly aggressive and pushed for too much. Until his empire collapsed, he was considered a tyrant and usurper by his opponents at the time and ever since. His critics charge that he was not troubled when faced with the prospect of war and death for thousands, turned his search for undisputed rule into a series of conflicts throughout Europe and ignored treaties and conventions alike. His role in the Haitian Revolution and decision to reinstate slavery in France's overseas colonies are controversial and affect his reputation. French liberal intellectual Benjamin Constant, 1767–1830, was a staunch critic of political homogenization and personality cult that dominated Napoleonic France and wrote several books condemning Napoleon, such as The Spirit of Conquest and Usurpation, 1814, and Principles of Politics Applicable to All Representative Governments, 1815. According to Constant, Bonapartism was even more tyrannical than the Bourbon monarchy, since it forced the masses to support its grand universalist narrative through imperialism and jingoism. Napoleon institutionalized plunder of conquered territories. French museums contain art stolen by Napoleon's forces from across Europe. Artifacts were brought to the Musée du Louvre for a grand central museum, an example which would later be followed by others. He was compared to Adolf Hitler by the historian Peter Gale in 1947 and Claude Ribber in 2005. David G. Chandler, a historian of Napoleonic warfare, wrote in 1973 that nothing could be more degrading to the former, Napoleon, and more flattering to the latter, Hitler. The comparison is odious. On the whole, Napoleon was inspired by a noble dream, wholly dissimilar from Hitler's. Napoleon left great and lasting testimonies to his genius in codes of law and national identities which survive to the present day. Adolf Hitler left nothing but destruction. Critics argue Napoleon's true legacy must reflect the loss of status for France and needless deaths brought by his rule. Historian Victor Davis Hansen writes, "After all, the military record is unquestioned. 17 years of wars, perhaps 6 million Europeans dead, France bankrupt, her overseas colonies lost." Macklin states that he can be viewed as the man who set back European economic life for a generation by the dislocating impact of his wars. Vincent Cronin replies that such criticism relies on the flawed premise that Napoleon was responsible for the wars which bear his name, when in fact France was the victim of a series of coalitions that aimed to destroy the ideals of the revolution. British military historian Corelli Barnett calls him a social misfit who exploited France for his personal megalomaniac goals. He says Napoleon's reputation is exaggerated. French scholar Jean Toulard provided an influential account of his image as a savior. Louis Bergeron has praised the numerous changes he made to French society, especially regarding the law as well as education. His greatest failure was the Russian invasion. Many historians have blamed Napoleon's poor planning, but Russian scholars instead emphasize the Russian response, noting the notorious winter weather was just as hard on the defenders. The large and growing historiography in French, English, Russian, Spanish and other languages has been summarized and evaluated by numerous scholars.